The vacation was supposed to bring our blended family closer together. Instead, I came home with my marriage falling apart, my ex threatening court, and my 16-year-old son refusing to speak to me. All because I thought I was teaching him a lesson. Now everyone says I punished the wrong person. My name is Melissa. I'm 39 years old, divorced, and remarried 3 years ago. My husband, Daniel, has 2 daughters from his previous marriage. I have one son, Ethan, who's 16. Blending our families hasn't been easy, but we've managed. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. This summer, we booked a 10-day trip to Costa Rica. It was supposed to be our first real family vacation. Beach resorts, rainforest tours, boat rides. Everything had been planned months in advance. The problem started before we even landed. Daniel noticed a trivia game on the plane. He jokingly asked if anyone wanted to challenge him. Ethan immediately raised his hand. "You sure?" Daniel laughed. "I don't lose." Ethan smiled. "I know." 20 minutes later, Daniel lost. Badly. The airline handed Ethan a small prize pack for winning. Everyone laughed, including Daniel. At first. But Ethan couldn't resist one last comment. "Guess being an adult doesn't make you smarter." Daniel forced a smile. I should have realized then that his pride had been bruised. Unfortunately, that was only the beginning. Every day, Ethan found a new competition. Kayaking, mini golf, ping pong, swimming, rock climbing. If there was a score, he wanted to win. And somehow, he usually did. Daniel hated losing, especially in front of his daughters. After each loss, Ethan would grin and say, "So, what do I win this time?" Sometimes it was ice cream, sometimes a souvenir, sometimes just bragging rights. At first it felt harmless, but after the 4th or 5th day, Daniel stopped laughing. His daughters started whispering that Ethan was showing off. Dinner conversations became awkward. Nobody wanted to sit between the two of them. Then came the snorkeling trip. The resort hosted a friendly treasure hunt underwater. The winning team received free tickets to a sunset cruise. Daniel insisted he and Ethan should be partners. "I'll finally beat you," he joked. Ethan shrugged. "We'll see." The guide explained the rules. Daniel ignored half of them. Ethan followed every instruction perfectly. They won by almost 6 minutes. When everyone applauded, Daniel ripped off his goggles and muttered, "You think you're funny?" Ethan answered quietly, "I wasn't trying to embarrass you." Daniel didn't respond, but I could see the frustration written all over his face. That night, I pulled Ethan aside. "Honey, you don't have to challenge Daniel every single time." He looked confused. "He keeps asking me." "I know, but maybe let him win once." He frowned. "So you want me to pretend I'm worse than I am?" "It's not pretending. It's being respectful." He crossed his arms. "So protecting his ego is my responsibility now?" I didn't answer, because honestly, I wasn't sure. The next morning, there was a family volleyball tournament. Before anyone even formed teams, Ethan announced, "I'm sitting this one out." Daniel looked surprised. "Why?" Ethan shrugged. "Mom says I'm not allowed to make you lose anymore." The entire group went silent. Even strangers nearby turned to look. Daniel's face went bright red. "What?" Ethan continued. "Apparently you're tired of losing." "I didn't say that," Daniel snapped. "You didn't have to." The argument exploded right there on the beach. Daniel stormed away before anyone could say another word. His daughters followed him without hesitation. I stayed behind with Ethan. "What was that?" I demanded. He looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. I told the truth. "You humiliated him." "No." I repeated what you told me. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. Because technically, he had. You knew exactly what you were doing. So did he every time he challenged me. I felt my patience slipping. "Ethan, enough. For the rest of this trip, you're done competing." He shrugged. "Fine." I thought that was the end of it. I couldn't have been more wrong. That afternoon, we took a guided hike through the rainforest. The guide warned everyone to stay together because the trails were narrow and slippery. Daniel insisted on leading the group. Every few minutes, he would point out something he'd read online about the wildlife. Most of it was wrong. Ethan quietly corrected him twice. The guide politely agreed with Ethan both times. By the third correction, Daniel stopped talking altogether. When we reached a suspension bridge overlooking the valley, everyone pulled out their phones for pictures. One of Daniel's daughters asked, "Dad, can you take our picture?" Before Daniel answered, Ethan smiled. "I'll do it." He snapped a dozen photos. They actually turned out great. His stepsisters loved them. Daniel barely said thank you. The tension was becoming impossible to ignore. Even the tour guide looked uncomfortable. That evening, back at the resort, Daniel sat beside me on the balcony. "I can't keep doing this." "What do you mean?" "He makes me look stupid every chance he gets." He's 16. So, he knows exactly how to push people's buttons. I sighed. "I'll talk to him again." Daniel shook his head. "No. He needs consequences." "For what?" "For disrespect." I stared at him. "He hasn't broken any rules." "He doesn't have to. He's undermining me in front of my daughters." That sentence stuck with me, because I understood what he meant. Whether Ethan intended it or not, Daniel no longer felt like the adult in the family. The next morning, the resort announced a family scavenger hunt. Winning teams would receive free passes to a zipline adventure. Before anyone could volunteer, Ethan stood up. "I'm not playing." Daniel laughed sarcastically. "What happened?" "Afraid you'll lose." Ethan looked up from his cereal. "I thought I wasn't supposed to compete anymore." A few nearby guests overheard. Someone chuckled. Daniel slammed his coffee mug onto the table. "Enough. I've had enough of your attitude." Ethan slowly stood. "My attitude? You're the one who keeps turning everything into a competition." Daniel took a step closer. "You think you're smarter than everyone." "No. I just don't pretend to lose." The dining room fell silent. Even the staff stopped walking for a moment. I immediately stood between them. "That's enough. Both of you." Neither one moved. I turned to Ethan. "You were warned." His expression changed instantly. "You can't be serious." "I am. For the next 3 days. You're staying at the resort." He blinked. "What?" "No excursions. No tours. No activities. You'll stay here while the rest of us go." For the first time all week. He looked genuinely hurt. "You'd rather punish me than admit he's acting like a child." "Watch your mouth." "I'm telling the truth." "No. You're refusing to respect this family." He stared at me for several seconds, then quietly said, "I guess I know where I stand." Without another word, he turned around and walked toward the elevators. I watched him disappear inside the hotel. Something about the way he walked made my stomach twist, but I ignored it. At the time, I honestly believed I was doing the right thing. I had no idea that those 3 days would permanently change my relationship with my son. The next morning, our shuttle left the resort at exactly 8. Ethan didn't come down to the lobby. He didn't ask to change my mind. He didn't argue. He simply stayed in his room. That somehow made me feel worse. Daniel squeezed my hand before we boarded. "You did the right thing." I nodded. At least. I tried to believe him. The first excursion without Ethan was a boat tour through the mangroves. Normally, Ethan would have been the one spotting monkeys in the trees or pointing out crocodiles before anyone else noticed them. Instead, there was an odd silence. Daniel's daughters chatted with each other, but every now and then one of them would ask, "Do you think Ethan's bored?" Daniel answered before I could. He brought this on himself. Nobody replied after that. Around noon, I checked my phone. No messages. No missed calls. I texted Ethan anyway. "Did you eat lunch?" 5 minutes later, he replied. "Yeah, that was it." No smiley face. No complaints. Just one word. For some reason, that worried me more than if he'd been angry. When we returned that evening, Ethan was sitting alone by the pool. He had a paperback novel in his hands. A half-finished soda sat beside him. He looked peaceful, almost like he had accepted that he wasn't part of the family activities anymore. I walked over. "How was your day?" He closed the book. "Quiet." "Did you stay here the whole time?" I walked around the resort. I played chess with an older couple. They beat me. He smiled faintly. I didn't ask for a rematch. His sarcasm stung. Before I could respond, Daniel called me from across the pool. Dinner reservation. Ethan stood up. I'll just grab pizza. Daniel didn't even look at him. We already have reservations for 4. Not 5. 4. I watched Ethan's smile disappear. He nodded once. No problem. Then he walked toward the snack bar alone. That image stayed in my head all night. The second day was worse. We spent the morning ziplining through the jungle. It should have been fun. Instead, I kept wondering what Ethan was doing. At lunch, I checked the resort app. It showed that my room key had been used to enter the arcade, then the cafe, then the library. He was entertaining himself, completely alone. Daniel noticed me staring at my phone. Can you stop worrying? He's fine. That's not the point. He needs consequences. He got them. I looked out the window. I think I might have gone too far. Daniel sighed. If you cave now, he'll never respect us. Those words echoed in my head. Respect. Was that really what this was about? Or were we punishing him for bruising an adult man's ego? I didn't want to ask myself that question. That evening, we found Ethan helping one of the resort employees carry boxes into a storage room. The manager thanked him. Apparently, an older guest had slipped near the gift shop. Ethan had stayed with the man until medical staff arrived. He'd even translated for the guest's wife, who barely spoke English. The manager smiled. You've got a really kind kid. I forced a smile back. Thank you. As we walked away, Daniel muttered. Of course, he'd want everyone here to think he's a hero. I stopped walking. What? Daniel shrugged. He loves attention. No. He helped someone. Daniel rolled his eyes. You always defend him. For the first time all trip. I didn't answer. The final day of Ethan's punishment arrived. That morning, I knocked on his hotel room door. No answer. I knocked again. Still nothing. My heart started racing. I used my key card and opened the door. The room was empty. His backpack was gone. His phone charger was missing. The bed had been made. He wasn't there. I searched the pool, the cafe, the arcade. Nothing. Then my phone rang. It wasn't Ethan. It was hotel security. Ma'am, I believe your son is with us. My stomach dropped. What happened? He isn't in trouble. But we think you should come to the front desk. The 15-minute walk to the lobby felt like an hour. Every horrible possibility ran through my mind. When I arrived, Ethan was sitting calmly beside an elderly couple I'd never seen before. The woman was holding his hand. She looked relieved to see me. Your son saved my husband's life. I froze. What? The hotel manager stepped forward. The gentleman collapsed during breakfast. Your son immediately started CPR while another guest called emergency services. The paramedics said those first few minutes probably saved him. I slowly turned toward Ethan. He avoided my eyes. I learned CPR at school. He said it so casually, like he'd simply held a door open for someone. The elderly woman stood and hugged him tightly. You gave me more time with my husband. Thank you. I couldn't speak. Not a single word. Because in that moment, the realization hit me like a truck. For 3 days, I had treated my own son like he was the problem. And while I was busy trying to protect my husband's pride, my 16-year-old had quietly become the kindest, most mature person in the entire family. The ride back to the hotel room was painfully quiet. No one spoke. Daniel stared out the window. His daughters looked down at their phones. I couldn't stop replaying what the hotel manager had said. Your son saved a man's life. Not once. Not once during those 3 days had Ethan complained. He hadn't called his father. He hadn't thrown a tantrum. He hadn't tried to sneak out. Instead, he had spent his time reading books, helping staff members, chatting with elderly guests, and now, saving someone's life. The guilt was crushing me. That evening, I knocked on Ethan's bedroom door. Can we talk? A few seconds later, the door opened. He didn't look angry. He just looked tired. I owe you an apology. He leaned against the door frame. For what? For everything. He stayed silent. I should never have left you here. I should have listened instead of assuming you were the problem. For the first time all week, his eyes began to water. I kept thinking. He paused. That if I stayed calm, maybe you'd realize I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I wasn't trying to beat Daniel. I was just having fun. I know. The words felt hollow. Because I should have known days ago. I took a deep breath. When we get home, I'm ending this. His eyebrows lifted. What do you mean? I'm not asking you to lose on purpose. I'm not asking you to shrink yourself to make an adult feel better. I was wrong. He stared at me for several seconds before quietly asking, "What about Daniel?" "I'll handle Daniel." That conversation happened less than an hour later. Daniel wasn't expecting it. "I think you owe Ethan an apology." He frowned. "For what?" "For making this vacation about your pride." Daniel laughed. "Seriously? He humiliated me every day." "No. You challenged him every day. And he happened to be better." His face hardened. "So you're taking his side now?" "I'm taking the side of what's right." He stood up from the couch. "So everything is my fault?" "I didn't say that. You punished him because you agreed with me." "I know. And I regret it." Daniel folded his arms. "I'm not apologizing." I looked him straight in the eyes. "Then we have a much bigger problem than this vacation." The flight home felt colder than the flight there. Daniel barely spoke. Ethan spent most of the flight listening to music. When we landed, my phone rang before we'd even reached baggage claim. It was my ex-husband, Ryan. I heard what happened. I closed my eyes. "Ethan told you?" "No." The hotel manager called. Apparently, the elderly couple Ethan had contacted the resort after returning home. They wanted to formally recognize him for saving the man's life. The manager couldn't reach me immediately, so they had called the emergency contact listed for Ethan. "Ryan, you left him alone for 3 days?" His voice was calm. That scared me more than if he'd yelled. "It wasn't like that." "Then explain it." I couldn't. Not in a way that made me sound like a good mother. A week later, Ryan filed paperwork requesting a change to our custody agreement. He wasn't asking for child support. He wasn't trying to punish me. He simply argued that Ethan deserved to live in the home where he felt emotionally supported. The judge ordered mediation before making any decision. During the meeting, the counselor asked Ethan one question. "When did you stop feeling safe talking to your mom?" The room went silent. Ethan looked at me, then quietly answered, "The day she asked me to pretend to be less than I am." I broke down crying. Because he was right. It had never been about a vacation, or competitions, or board games. It was about teaching my son that keeping the peace mattered more than being himself. 6 months have passed since then. Ryan still has primary custody. Ethan spends weekends with me. Slowly, we're rebuilding our relationship. It's not easy. Trust never comes back overnight. Daniel and I started couples counseling. He attended exactly 2 sessions. Then he quit. 3 months later, I filed for divorce. Not because he lost a few games on vacation, but because I finally realized how often I had been choosing his comfort over my son's well-being. Last weekend, Ethan came over for dinner. After we finished eating, he challenged me to a game of chess. Halfway through the match, I realized I was about to lose. Badly. He noticed. "You can still resign." I smiled. "No. I'd rather lose honestly than win because someone let me." He grinned. 10 moves later, he checkmated me. I laughed. "You know, I've gotten pretty good at losing." For the first time in a long time. He laughed too. And somehow, that felt like the real beginning of our family healing. People say every bride deserves to feel like the center of attention on her wedding day. I agreed. Until my own sister accidentally became the person everyone was talking about. By the end of the reception, I had thrown her out, fired my photographer, and lost half my family. Now everyone says I ruined my own wedding. I've always been the responsible sister. I'm 28. I work as an accountant. Everything in my life is planned months ahead. My younger sister, Lily, is 23. She's the complete opposite. She never plans anything. She's loud, spontaneous, and somehow everyone loves her for it. Growing up, people constantly compared us. Teachers loved my grades. Friends loved her personality. At every family gathering, it seemed like someone was saying, "Emily is so smart, but Lily can light up a room." I hated hearing that. Not because I disliked my sister, because no matter how hard I worked, I always felt invisible standing next to her. When I got engaged to my fiancé, Mark, I promised myself one thing. This day would finally be about me, not Lily. Me. I spent almost 18 months planning every detail. The venue, the flowers, the lighting, the music, even the seating chart. Nothing was left to chance. I even asked everyone to wear muted colors. No bright red. No sparkling dresses. No flashy jewelry. Everyone agreed, including Lily. She even texted me the dress she planned to wear. A simple navy blue dress. Perfect. I thought we were finally on the same page. The wedding day started perfectly. The ceremony was beautiful. The weather couldn't have been better. People cried during our vows. Even my father, who almost never cries. I remember thinking, this is exactly how I imagined it. Then came cocktail hour. As guests gathered outside, I noticed a crowd forming near the fountain. People were laughing, taking pictures. At first, I assumed they were admiring the decorations. Then I realized they were surrounding Lily. She wasn't doing anything inappropriate. She was simply helping a little flower girl who had tripped and ripped her dress. Lily knelt on the ground, used a small sewing kit from her purse, and somehow fixed the little girl's dress in less than 5 minutes. The child's parents hugged her. Guests started clapping. Someone shouted, "She saved the day." The photographer immediately began taking pictures. Lots of pictures. I felt something twist in my stomach. This wasn't supposed to be her moment. It was mine. A few minutes later, I walked over to the photographer. "Can you stop photographing my sister?" He looked confused. "Sorry. I hired you to photograph my wedding, not her." He politely nodded. "I understand." But she was helping the flower girl. People loved the moment. "I don't care. I don't want my wedding album turning into the Lily show." He hesitated for a second, then quietly said, "I'll focus on you." That should have been enough. But somehow, it wasn't. As dinner began, I noticed guests walking over to Lily's table. Not because she was demanding attention, because they wanted to thank her. The little girl's grandmother brought her a slice of cake. Another guest complimented her kindness. Someone else asked if she'd work with children because she seemed so patient. Meanwhile, I was sitting at the head table, watching my own wedding slowly slip away from me. That's when I made the worst decision of my life. I couldn't stop watching her. Everywhere Lily went, people smiled. The little flower girl refused to leave her side. The photographer snapped another photo, then another. I saw him crouch down to capture Lily laughing with a group of kids on the lawn. Something inside me snapped. I marched over to him. "I thought we already talked." He lowered his camera. "We did. So why are you still taking pictures of her?" He looked genuinely confused. "I'm photographing the wedding." "She's part of the wedding." "No. She's becoming the wedding." A nearby bridesmaid glanced over. The photographer spoke carefully. "These are candid moments. People usually love having them in the album." "I won't. I want those photos deleted." His eyebrows shot up. "Deleted? Every single one?" He hesitated. "I don't delete photos during an event. They're part of the story. I don't care about the story. I paid for pictures of me, not my sister." The conversation was louder than I realized. A few nearby guests had gone quiet. Even Lily noticed something was wrong. She walked over. "Everything okay?" I turned toward her. "You've had enough attention for one day." Her smile disappeared. "What?" "You know exactly what you're doing." She blinked. "I honestly don't." "Don't pretend. You always have to be the center of attention." For several seconds, she just stared at me, then quietly asked, "Because I fixed a little girl's dress?" I folded my arms. "You could have let someone else handle it." The kid was crying. "I had a sewing kit. I helped. That's it." Before I could respond, our mother stepped between us. "Emily, enough." I couldn't believe it. "You're taking her side?" "There aren't sides. You're making a scene. I looked around. Dozens of guests were pretending not to watch. Some definitely were. I felt my face burning. This is my wedding. I should be the one people are talking about. Mom sighed. They're talking about you. Unfortunately, it's because you're yelling. I wish I could say I stopped there. I didn't. Instead, I found the wedding coordinator. I want Lily removed from the reception. The coordinator froze. I'm sorry. I don't want her here anymore. She's ruining my wedding. The coordinator looked completely uncomfortable. I can't ask a guest to leave unless they're causing a disturbance. I am the bride. I don't care. Tell her to go. A few minutes later, Mark found me standing near the dance floor. What happened? I explained everything. Or at least, my version of everything. When I finished, he didn't say anything. He just looked toward Lily. She was sitting alone now, quietly eating dinner. The little flower girl had walked over again. She handed Lily one of the flowers from the centerpiece. Lily smiled, tucked it behind the little girl's ear instead. Then they both laughed. Mark looked back at me. That's the person you think is ruining today? I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. He shook his head slowly. I think you're ruining it yourself. Those words hit harder than anything anyone had said all day. But instead of listening, I doubled down. I told him if he wasn't going to support me, then maybe he should spend the rest of the reception sitting with my sister instead. The disappointment on his face was something I would never forget. For the next hour, the reception felt like two completely different weddings. On one side of the ballroom, the DJ was trying to get people onto the dance floor. On the other, small groups of guests were quietly whispering about what had just happened. Every time someone looked in my direction, I assumed they were judging me. Maybe they were. Maybe they weren't. But once that thought entered my head, I couldn't let it go. My maid of honor, Rachel, pulled me aside. Take a breath. I'm fine. No, you're really not. She handed me a glass of water. You've spent months planning today. Don't let one moment ruin it. I laughed bitterly. One moment. Half the guests are talking about Lily. Rachel looked toward my sister. Lily was helping the flower girl color in a children's activity book while the parents enjoyed dinner. She wasn't making speeches. She wasn't posing for pictures. She wasn't even looking in my direction. Rachel quietly said, I don't think she's trying to compete with you. I looked away. She doesn't have to. A few minutes later, the photographer approached me. I wanted to let you know. I've stopped taking close-up photos of your sister. I nodded. Good. But he hesitated. I can't erase moments that already happened. I own the copyright until I deliver the gallery. If you'd like certain photos excluded from your final album, we can discuss that later. His calm professionalism somehow irritated me even more. No, I want them deleted. Tonight. He shook his head. I'm sorry. I won't do that. That was when I completely lost control. If you're not going to do the job I hired you for, then you're fired. The room seemed to stop. The DJ lowered the music. Several guests turned to look. The photographer slowly removed the camera from around his neck. I understand. He handed one of his backup cameras to his assistant. I'm leaving. His assistant looked shocked. Are you serious? He nodded once. We're done here. Then he walked out. Without another word. Reality hit me almost immediately. There was no photographer. No one documenting our first dance. No photos of the cake cutting. No pictures of the speeches. Nothing. Mark stared at the exit. Then at me. You just fired our photographer. Before our reception was even half over, I tried to defend myself. He refused to listen. Mark's voice stayed incredibly calm. No. He refused to destroy his work. There's a difference. The wedding coordinator rushed over. We have a problem. What now? The photographer has already contacted his studio. They're sending another photographer. But they're over an hour away. An hour. Our reception only had 3 hours left. Most of the biggest moments were about to happen. I suddenly realized what I'd done. Then something unexpected happened. Lily stood up. She walked over carrying a small camera. I brought this as a backup. I frowned. What? I've been learning photography. I wasn't planning on using it. But if you want, I can photograph the rest of the night. The ballroom went completely silent. After everything I'd said to her, she was still trying to help. I couldn't even look her in the eyes. Before I could answer, Mark gently took the camera from her. "Thank you." He smiled. "But after today, I think my wife owes you enough already." Lily gave a small nod. "I just didn't want them to have no memories." Then she quietly returned to her table. For the first time all day, I realized the attention she had been getting had never been something she asked for. She had simply been kind. And I had mistaken kindness for competition. The replacement photographer eventually arrived. By then, the cake had already been cut. The father-daughter dance was over. Half the guests had already left. There was no way to recreate those moments. I tried convincing myself it wasn't a big deal. "It's just pictures," I whispered. But deep down, I knew it wasn't about the pictures anymore. It was about everything I had done to get rid of them. The next morning, Mark and I left for our honeymoon. It should have been the happiest week of our lives. Instead, we barely spoke. On the third day, he finally broke the silence. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If Lily had never been there, do you think you would have enjoyed our wedding?" I frowned. "What kind of question is that?" "A serious one." I thought about it, longer than I expected. Then I quietly admitted, "I don't know." Mark nodded. "I think that's the real problem." When we returned home, reality hit much harder. My phone was flooded with messages. Some were supportive. Most weren't. One message stood out. It was from the photographer. He attached a link. I wasn't sure if I'd ever send these, but after thinking about it, "I believe you should have them." The folder contained every photo he had taken before leaving. I opened the first image. It was me walking down the aisle with my father. Beautiful. The next one, Mark wiping away a tear during our vows. Another, my grandmother laughing with my niece. Then, the pictures of Lily. There she was, kneeling on the ground, carefully sewing the little girl's dress. The child looked terrified in the first photo, then relieved, then smiling. In the last picture, the little girl wrapped her tiny arms around my sister. Lily wasn't looking at the camera. She wasn't posing. She wasn't trying to steal attention. She was simply helping someone. I burst into tears. For the first time, I saw the moment through someone else's eyes. That evening, I drove to Lily's apartment. She opened the door. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Finally, I said, "I'm sorry." She gave a sad smile. "For which part?" "All of it." She invited me inside. We sat on her couch. I confessed everything. "I've spent my whole life comparing myself to you. I convinced myself everyone loved you more. I walked into my own wedding already expecting to lose." Lily stared at me in disbelief. "You know what I spent my whole childhood thinking?" I shook my head. She laughed softly. "I wished I could be more like you." I blinked. "What?" "You always had a plan. You always knew what you were doing." I spent years feeling like I could never live up to you. Neither of us spoke. We had spent decades envying each other's lives, without either of us realizing it. A week later, Mark and I met the photographer. I apologized for firing him. I offered to pay him for the entire event, even the hours he never worked. He accepted the payment. But before leaving, he said something I'll never forget. "I've photographed over 300 weddings. The happiest brides aren't the ones with perfect weddings. They're the ones who stop worrying about perfection." 6 months have passed. Lily and I talk every week now. Our relationship isn't perfect, but it's real. Mark and I are in counseling. Not because our marriage is falling apart, but because I finally admitted something I'd ignored for years. My wedding didn't expose a problem with my sister. It exposed a problem inside me. Last month, the little flower girl mailed Lily a handmade birthday card. Inside was a crayon drawing of the wedding. The bride and groom stood in the center. Next to them, a young woman kneeling down, fixing a tiny blue dress. Across the top, in uneven handwriting, the child had written, "Thank you for helping me when I was scared." Lily smiled when she showed me the card. "So, you still think I stole your wedding?" I laughed through tears. No. I handed it away myself. And that was the hardest, yet most honest, lesson I've ever learned. When my wife suggested opening our marriage, I thought it was about freedom, about trust, about honesty. 3 years later, she sat me down over dinner, smiled, and asked the one question I never saw coming. How would you feel about helping me raise another man's baby? I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. My name is Ryan. I'm 41 years old. My wife, Claire, and I have been married for 16 years. We have one daughter together. She's 12. For most of our marriage, things were normal. Not perfect, but stable. We argued about money, forgot anniversaries, got annoyed over dishes in the sink. Nothing unusual. Then, about 4 years ago, Claire started talking about how she'd never really experienced life before marriage. She'd gone straight from college to dating me, to getting married, to becoming a mother. One night, she admitted something that caught me completely off guard. I love you, but sometimes I wonder who I'd be if I dated other people. That conversation lasted almost 6 hours. By the end of it, she suggested opening our marriage. At first, I laughed. I thought she was kidding. She wasn't. For months, I said no, every single time. Eventually, she stopped bringing it up. Or at least, that's what I thought. A year later, she came back with a completely different approach. No secrets. No lying. No emotional affairs. If either of us feels uncomfortable, we stop. It sounded reasonable, at least on paper. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The first few months, nothing really happened. Neither of us dated anyone. Life continued almost exactly the same. Then Claire met someone. His name was Evan. He was 43, divorced, no kids. He owned a small architecture firm across town. Claire insisted they were just having coffee, then dinners, then weekends away. She always came home smiling. Strangely, I wasn't jealous. I was relieved. Because every time she came home, she hugged me. She thanked me for trusting her. She reminded me, I'm not going anywhere. I believed her. Maybe I wanted to believe her. About 18 months later, Evan became a regular topic in our house. Claire talked about him constantly. The books he liked, the places they'd visited, the stupid jokes he told. Even our daughter knew his name, though she'd never met him. One evening, Claire asked if I'd be willing to have dinner with him. I hesitated, but eventually agreed. I figured, if this arrangement was supposed to be built on honesty, then maybe meeting him would make things less strange. Instead, it became the beginning of the end. Meeting Evan wasn't awkward. At least, not at first. He was polite, well-spoken, the kind of man who made eye contact when he talked. He shook my hand firmly. Told me a lot about you, he said. I've heard good things. I smiled. So have I. For a while, it almost felt like a business dinner. We talked about work, sports, travel. Nothing uncomfortable. Then Claire reached across the table and held his hand. Without thinking, the restaurant suddenly felt a lot quieter. She noticed my expression and quickly pulled away. I'm sorry. I wasn't thinking. I nodded. It's okay. But it wasn't. Not really. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. Finally, Claire broke the silence. Did tonight bother you? I answered honestly. A little. She nodded. I understand. I'll be more careful. And for a while, she was. She stopped mentioning Evan quite as often. She scheduled fewer weekends away. I started believing we'd found a balance. Maybe this strange arrangement could actually work. About 6 months later, Claire asked if we could have a serious conversation after our daughter went to bed. Whenever someone starts a sentence like that, you already know your evening is over. She poured 2 glasses of wine, sat across from me, and looked unusually nervous. I need you to promise you'll hear me out. I laughed. That never ends well. She didn't laugh back. I mean it. I nodded. Okay. She took a deep breath. Evan wants children. I blinked. Okay. He never had the chance. I feel bad for him. I wasn't sure where this was going. So, She looked down at her hands. I've been thinking. I could have won. The room went completely silent. I stared at her. I don't understand. A baby. With Evan. She said it so calmly, as if she were suggesting we repaint the kitchen. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny. Because my brain refused to believe I'd heard her correctly. Good one. She didn't smile. Ryan. I'm serious. The laughter disappeared from my face. You want another child? No. I want to help him become a father. I kept waiting for the punchline. It never came. And where exactly do I fit into this plan? She answered immediately. You'd still be my husband. We'd still live together. We'd raise the baby together. I felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. Together. Yes. You've always been an amazing dad. I know you'd love the baby eventually. I couldn't even process the sentence. You expect me to raise another man's child? She reached for my hand. I pulled it away. It wouldn't just be his child. It would be ours too. No, it wouldn't. She looked hurt. You're making it sound awful. I'm describing exactly what you just asked. She sighed. This isn't cheating. We agreed to an open marriage. I agreed to dating. I never agreed to becoming a co-parent in someone else's relationship. She frowned. I thought you'd be more open-minded. Those words hit me harder than they should have. Open-minded? Was that really what this was about? I stood up from the table. I need some air. She followed me to the front door. Please don't leave angry. I'm not angry. I paused. I'm trying very hard not to become angry. I walked around the neighborhood for nearly 2 hours. Every promise we'd made when we opened our marriage replayed in my head. No secrets. No lies. No replacing each other. Somewhere along the way, those promises had quietly changed. Only, no one had told me. When I finally came home, Claire was asleep on the couch. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. I wasn't planning to look, but the screen lit up with a message preview. From Evan. Did he say yes? I stared at those 3 words. They told me something Claire hadn't. This wasn't just an idea. They had already been planning it. I didn't touch her phone. I didn't need to. That single message had already answered the question that had been haunting me all night. Did he say yes? Not. What do you think he'll say? Not. Have you talked to him yet? No. They had already discussed it. They were simply waiting for my approval. Or at least, what they hoped would look like approval. The next morning, Claire acted as though nothing had happened. She made coffee, packed our daughter's lunch, asked me if I wanted eggs. I watched her move around the kitchen. The same woman I'd spent 16 years building a life with suddenly felt like a stranger. Finally, I asked, "How long?" She looked up. "What? How long have you and Evan been talking about having a baby?" She froze. Only for a second. But it was enough. I don't know. Maybe a few months. A few months. She nodded cautiously. We were only talking. I let out a slow breath. So while you were telling me we made decisions together, you were already planning a child with someone else. Her eyes filled with tears. I didn't know how to bring it up. That evening, I asked if Evan would meet me. Alone. No Claire. No distractions. To my surprise, he agreed immediately. We met at a quiet coffee shop across town. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, I asked him the only question that mattered. Whose idea was it? He looked genuinely confused. The baby. He leaned back. I assumed it was Claire's. You didn't ask? I asked if she was serious. And? She said she'd already been thinking about it. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then he quietly added, I honestly believe the 2 of you had already talked. I stared at him. You thought I already knew? He nodded. She told me the 3 of us believed honesty was the foundation of your marriage. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was unbelievable. She left out one important detail. What? She never actually asked me. For the first time, I saw confusion on Evan's face. Real confusion. He rubbed his forehead. I need to ask you something. Go ahead. If you said no, would she leave you? The question caught me completely off guard. I don't know. He looked down at his coffee. Neither do I. Then he admitted something I never expected. I lost my wife 8 years ago. I blinked. What? Cancer. We spent years trying to have children. It never happened. His voice cracked for the first time. When Claire told me she might be willing, I thought. He couldn't finish the sentence. I suddenly realized. The villain I'd imagined wasn't sitting across from me. He was just another person chasing something he'd lost. When I got home, Claire was waiting. She could tell immediately that I'd spoken to him. What did he say? I looked her straight in the eyes. He thought I already knew. The color drained from her face. You let him believe we had already agreed. I didn't mean. You didn't correct him. Silence. That silence said everything. For the first time in our marriage, I slept in the guest room. Not because I hated her. Not because I wanted revenge. But because I no longer trusted the person sleeping down the hall. Trust isn't usually destroyed by one huge lie. Sometimes, it's worn away by dozens of smaller ones. And I was beginning to wonder how many I had never noticed. The next morning, I received a call from my older sister. She had never approved of our open marriage, but she'd always kept her opinions to herself. This time, she didn't. She asked one simple question. Ryan, are you still making decisions because they're right for you, or because you're afraid of losing her? I didn't answer. Because for the first time, I wasn't sure I knew the difference. I spent the next week thinking about my sister's question. Are you staying because you want this life, or because you're afraid to lose it? Every time I tried to answer, I came back to the same realization. I wasn't protecting my marriage anymore. I was protecting the memory of the marriage we used to have. Those weren't the same thing. A few days later, Claire asked if we could talk. This time I agreed. We sat at our kitchen table, the same place where she'd first suggested opening our marriage nearly 4 years earlier. She looked exhausted. I know I hurt you. I nodded. You did. She took a deep breath. I ended things with Evan. That surprised me. You did. She nodded. He said he didn't want to be the reason our family fell apart. I looked at her for a long moment. And what do you want? Tears welled in her eyes. I want my family. I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Do you want me? Or do you want the life we've built? She couldn't answer. Not right away. That silence hurt more than any argument ever could. 2 days later, Evan called me. I thought you should hear it from me. I'm moving. Out of state. I thanked him for telling me. Before hanging up, he said something I didn't expect. I cared about Claire. But I never wanted to replace you. I think we both believed she knew what she wanted. He paused. Turns out, none of us really did. That was the last time we ever spoke. Claire and I started marriage counseling. Not because everything was fixed. Because everything was broken. For months, we unpacked conversations we'd avoided for years. She admitted she'd confused honesty with permission. Because we'd agreed to an open marriage, she assumed every future decision automatically belonged under that agreement. Our therapist gently corrected her. Being open doesn't eliminate the need for new boundaries. You don't make life-changing decisions based on yesterday's permission. That sentence stayed with both of us. One evening after therapy, Claire finally confessed something she'd never said out loud. I was terrified of getting older. I looked at her. What do you mean? When Evan talked about becoming a father, it made me feel young again. It made me feel needed. She wiped away a tear. It wasn't really about the baby. It was about chasing a version of myself I thought I'd lost. For the first time in months, I understood. Understanding didn't erase the pain, but it explained it. 6 months later, we made the hardest decision of our lives. We separated. Not because we hated each other. Because we had become different people. People who still cared deeply, but no longer wanted the same future. Our daughter took the news better than either of us expected. She hugged us both, then quietly said, I'd rather have 2 happy homes than one unhappy one. Neither of us could hold back our tears. A year has passed now. Claire has her own apartment. She's rebuilding her life. I'm doing the same. We share custody of our daughter. Every Friday night, the 3 of us still have dinner together. Not because we're pretending to be a family. Because, in a different way, we still are. Last month, my daughter asked me something while we were washing the dishes. Dad, if Mom hadn't asked for that baby, would you still be together? I thought about it for a long time. Then I answered honestly. No. She looked surprised. Really? I smiled sadly. The baby wasn't the reason we separated. It was the moment we realized we'd stopped asking each other what we needed and started assuming we already knew. She nodded thoughtfully. I guess assumptions can be dangerous. I smiled. They're one of the most expensive mistakes people make. Looking back now, I don't regret trying to save my marriage. But I do regret how long I ignored the signs that we were no longer building the same future. Sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes trust isn't destroyed by betrayal. It's slowly undone by silence, assumptions, and conversations that never happen. And if there's one lesson I hope my daughter carries into her own relationships one day, it's this. Never assume the person you love knows your boundaries. Talk about them. Again and again. For almost 10 years, I quietly helped my younger brother whenever he needed it. Medical bills, car repairs, even his daughter's private school tuition. I never asked for recognition. I only asked him to keep it between us. Then, at my niece's birthday party, he stood in front of 30 people, laughed, and said, "Don't worry. My brother has money. He'll pay for anything." Everyone laughed. I smiled too. But inside, something changed. 3 months later, he asked me to help him buy a house. For the first time in my life, I said no. Now my entire family thinks I've abandoned him. My name is David. I'm 46 years old. My younger brother, Kevin, is 38. Growing up, we weren't close. Not because we hated each other. We were simply different. I liked structure. He lived one day at a time. I saved every paycheck. He spent every bonus before it arrived. When our parents passed away within 3 years of each other, I was already financially stable. Kevin wasn't. He had a wife, 2 young children, a mountain of debt, and a small construction business that barely stayed afloat. I never judged him for struggling. Life isn't always fair. Sometimes good people fall behind. So, whenever I could help, I did. The first loan was $5,000. His truck had broken down. Without it, he couldn't work. "I'll pay you back," he promised. I told him not to worry about it. A year later, his oldest daughter needed braces. Insurance covered most of it, but not all. I quietly paid the rest. Another time, his water heater exploded in the middle of winter. I paid for the replacement. Every birthday, every Christmas, I slipped money into envelopes for the kids. I never signed my name. I wanted them to think it came from their parents, because I never wanted my help to become a debt they felt they owed. People assume I must be wealthy. I'm not. I own a small logistics company. I work 6 days a week. Most nights, I'm still answering emails after dinner. Everything I have, I earned. The only reason I had money to help Kevin was because I spent years saying no to things I wanted. I drove the same pickup truck for 15 years, skipped expensive vacations, rarely bought anything for myself. Helping my brother wasn't easy. It was a choice, one I never regretted. At least, not then. Kevin always thanked me privately. Or at least he used to. Over time, something changed. He stopped asking if I could help. Instead, he asked when I could send the money. The gratitude slowly disappeared. It was replaced by expectation. At first, I told myself I was imagining it. Then little comments started slipping into conversations. If David's coming, dinner's covered. My brother always figures something out. He makes more than the rest of us. Everyone laughed. I laughed too. But each joke felt a little heavier than the last. The turning point came at my niece Emma's 15th birthday. It was a backyard barbecue. Nothing fancy. Just family and close friends. Kevin was flipping burgers while everyone talked on the patio. Someone mentioned how expensive houses had become. Another guest joked, "I don't know how anyone affords anything anymore." Kevin grinned. "Oh, it's easy." Everyone looked at him. He pointed his spatula toward me. You just need an older brother like mine. A few people chuckled. Then he added, seriously, David's basically the family bank. If any of us get into trouble, we know who to call. The laughter grew louder. Someone raised a drink toward me. Must be nice being the rich uncle. Another person joked. So you're buying dessert too? I forced a smile. Inside, I felt something sink. Not because of the money. Because, for the first time, I realized my generosity had become my identity. To them, I wasn't David anymore. I was simply the wallet. Later that evening, as everyone was leaving, Kevin pulled me aside. Hey, I've been meaning to talk to you. His tone suddenly became serious. We found a house. I smiled politely. That's great. He looked genuinely excited. It needs a bigger down payment than we expected. He paused, then asked the question I already knew was coming. I was hoping you could help us one more time. I looked past him. His children were laughing as they loaded gifts into the car. His wife was waving goodbye to relatives. Then I looked back at my brother. For the first time in nearly a decade, I didn't answer immediately. Because deep down, I wasn't deciding whether I could afford the money. I was deciding whether I could afford to keep saying yes. I didn't answer him right away. Kevin noticed. You okay? I forced a smile. I'm just surprised. By what? That you're asking me about a house, 5 minutes after introducing me as the family bank. His smile faded. Oh, come on. It was a joke. Everyone laughed. I nodded. They did. So why are you upset? That question told me everything. He honestly didn't understand why it bothered me. I've helped you for years. I know. And I'm happy I did. But lately, it doesn't feel like help anymore. It feels expected. Kevin crossed his arms. So what? I'm not allowed to rely on my own brother? That's not what I said. It kind of is. He sighed dramatically. I knew bringing this up was a mistake. I looked at him. No. The mistake was assuming the answer would always be yes. He rubbed the back of his neck. It's just a loan. You know I'd pay you back. I didn't remind him. He'd said exactly the same thing almost every other time. Most of those loans had quietly turned into gifts. Not because he'd repaid them. Because I stopped asking. How much do you need? He hesitated. 70,000. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. 70. He nodded. It's enough for the down payment. I couldn't even find the words. That wasn't helping fix a truck. Or paying a medical bill. He wasn't asking me to solve an emergency. He was asking me to fund the biggest purchase of his life. I can't do that. The words came out calmer than I expected. Kevin stared at me. You can't. Or you won't. I won't. He blinked. Why? Because buying a house isn't my responsibility. It's mine. His face hardened. So after everything, you're just going to leave us hanging? I frowned. Leave you hanging? You haven't even made an offer yet. You still have options. We've already told the kids. I sighed. That's not something you should have done before the financing was secured. His voice became louder. You know what your problem is? I stayed quiet. You've forgotten what it's like to struggle. That one stung. Because it wasn't true. I remembered every second of struggling. I remembered eating instant noodles for weeks while trying to keep my business alive. I remembered sleeping in my office because I couldn't afford an apartment. I remembered working 18-hour days. The difference was, no one rescued me. I haven't forgotten. I just learned something from it. What? That no one else is responsible for building my life. He laughed bitterly. Easy to say when you're successful. I looked him straight in the eye. Success didn't happen first. Responsibility did. He shook his head. I can't believe this. You have the money. You wouldn't even notice it's gone. I quietly answered. That's exactly why you're asking. Silence. His expression changed. Not to guilt. To anger. You know what? Forget it. We'll figure it out ourselves. I hope you do. He walked away without saying goodbye. 3 days later, my phone started ringing. First, my aunt. Then my cousin. Then my mother's best friend. Every conversation sounded strangely similar. I heard Kevin asked for a little help. And you turned him down. A little help. That was how the story had already changed. Not $70,000. Not a house. Just a little help. By the end of the week, I realized Kevin hadn't simply told people I said no. He'd left out almost everything else. And without the full story, I looked like the selfish older brother who had abandoned his family. Then my niece Emma called. She was crying. Uncle David, Dad says we might lose the house because you don't care about us anymore. Those words broke my heart. Because I knew immediately. She believed them. Emma's phone calls stayed with me for days. Not because she was angry. Because she sounded scared. She was 15. Old enough to understand that adults worried about money. Too young to understand how adults sometimes used children to win arguments. I reassured her. Sweetheart, you're not losing your home because of me. She sniffled. But Dad said. I know what your dad said. Just promise me one thing. What? Don't worry about grown-up problems. She quietly whispered. Okay. Before hanging up, she added. I still love you, Uncle David. I had to wait several seconds before I could answer. I love you too. That weekend, I drove to Kevin's house. Not to argue. Not to hand him a check. Just to clear the air. He opened the door and immediately frowned. What are you doing here? We need to talk. I'm busy. It'll only take a few minutes. After a long pause, he stepped aside. The atmosphere inside the house felt tense. His wife, Melissa, was in the kitchen. She gave me a small smile. It looked more exhausted than welcoming. The kids stayed upstairs. Probably because they could already tell another difficult conversation was about to happen. I sat down across from Kevin. I got a call from Emma. His jaw tightened. So, she thinks she's losing the house because I don't care about your family. I never said that. I looked at him. Really? He avoided my eyes. I might have said you weren't willing to help. That's different. No, it isn't. For the first time, Melissa spoke. Kevin, I think we should be honest. He shot her a warning look. She ignored it. You told the kids Uncle David backed out. You never explained that the house wasn't even under contract. Kevin sighed loudly. Can we not do this? Melissa folded her arms. No, we're doing it. She turned toward me. I didn't know he was asking for $70,000. I blinked. You didn't. She slowly shook her head. He told me it was closer to 15. The room fell silent. I looked at Kevin. He stared at the floor. So, you lied to your own wife. I was trying to avoid another argument. No, you were trying to make sure everyone stayed on your side. His face turned red. You think you're better than me because you have money. I almost laughed. No, I think I'm better at telling the truth. Kevin slammed his hand on the table. You have no idea what it's like trying to support a family. I stared at him. I've been supporting yours for nearly 10 years. That sentence hung in the air. No one spoke. Not even Melissa. Because it was true. Then something happened that I never expected. Melissa quietly stood up. She disappeared upstairs. A minute later, she came back carrying a small notebook. She placed it on the table in front of Kevin. Show him. He didn't move. What is that? I asked. Melissa answered. It's every dollar David has ever given us. I opened the notebook. Each page had dates, amounts, reasons, truck repairs, school tuition, medical bills, rent during the pandemic, Christmas gifts, emergency plumbing, new furnace, summer camp, everything. Melissa had written it all down. At the bottom of the final page, she had totaled the amount. $186,430. I stared at the number. I honestly hadn't realized it was that much. Neither had Kevin. Melissa looked at her husband. You know what hurts the most? He didn't answer. You've spent years telling everyone your brother helps because he's rich. She pointed toward the notebook. He helps because he loves us. Her voice cracked. And somewhere along the way, you stopped seeing the difference. Kevin looked completely defeated. For the first time since I'd arrived, he wasn't angry. He just looked tired. Really tired. Then he quietly admitted something I'd never expected to hear. I don't even know when I started believing I was entitled to it. No one had an answer. Because entitlement rarely appears overnight. It grows, one favor at a time. For a long time, none of us spoke. The notebook remained open on the table. $186,000. Not in one giant check, but in hundreds of small decisions. A truck, a hospital bill, a broken furnace, school tuition. Every page represented a moment when I had chosen my brother over myself. And somehow, neither of us had realized how much those moments had added up. Kevin finally looked at me. His eyes were red. I'm sorry. I had imagined hearing those words for weeks. Strangely, they didn't make me feel victorious. They made me feel sad, because I realized we had both lost something. He had lost his independence, and I had lost my brother. I should have stopped asking years ago, he said quietly. I shook my head. I should have stopped saying yes every single time. He looked confused. What do you mean? I trained you to believe I would always fix everything. Every emergency. Every bad decision. Every unexpected bill. I stepped in before you ever had to solve it yourself. He lowered his head. I guess you did. For the first time. We were both admitting the truth. This wasn't entirely his fault. I had been helping out of love. But somewhere along the way, love had turned into enabling. Before I left, Melissa stopped me at the front door. Can I ask you one favor? I smiled. If I can. She handed me the notebook. Keep it. I frowned. I don't need this. I think you do. She gently closed it and placed it in my hands. Not to remember what you've spent. To remember that you've already done enough. I didn't know what to say, so I simply hugged her. Over the next few months, things changed. Not overnight, but little by little. Kevin sold the oversized pickup truck he'd been making payments on. They canceled a luxury vacation they'd booked months earlier. Melissa picked up a part-time bookkeeping job. Kevin started taking weekend contracting work. It wasn't easy, but for the first time in years, they were solving their own problems. About 8 months later, I got an invitation in the mail. It wasn't a birthday. It wasn't Christmas. It was a housewarming party. A much smaller house than the one Kevin had originally wanted. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms. An old porch. A tiny backyard. But it was theirs. They had qualified for it on their own. No loan from me. No down payment from me. Just their own hard work. When I arrived, Kevin met me in the driveway. He looked nervous. Then he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a single check. For $500. I laughed. You know you don't owe me this. I know. He smiled. But I owe myself. It's the first payment. I don't care if it takes 20 years. I'm paying you back. I looked at the check for a long moment. Then I folded it and slipped it back into the envelope. I'm cashing it. He smiled. I was hoping you would. Because for the first time, it wasn't about the money. It was about responsibility. Later that afternoon, Emma gave everyone a tour of the house. When we reached her bedroom, she pulled me aside. Dad's different now. I smiled. Yeah, she nodded. He doesn't complain about money anymore. He says if he wants something, he has to earn it. I laughed softly. That's a pretty good lesson. She grinned. He says he learned it from you. Last week. Nearly 2 years after that disastrous birthday barbecue. Our whole family gathered again. Someone joked about dessert. Before anyone else could say a word, Kevin stood up and laughed. This one's on me. Then he looked across the table at me. And before anyone asks, my brother isn't the family bank. He's just my brother. That simple sentence meant more to me than any repayment ever could. Sometimes the best way to help someone isn't by giving them more. Sometimes it's by stepping back, so they can discover they're stronger than they ever believed. And sometimes, the greatest gift you can give the people you love is the chance to stand on their own.